Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're metaphorically grabbing our shovels, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
We're exploring the world of metal detecting and, maybe more importantly, figuring out the best places to find, well, a piece of history.
Right.
We've pulled together quite a bit of info to try and answer that one big question. Where are you most likely to find those historical treasures with a detector?
It's a good question.
Yeah. So whether you're already out there doing it, maybe just thinking about starting, or, even if you just like the idea of uncovering the past, this deep dive should give you a better handle on spotting promising locations.
And why they're promising, too. It's pretty amazing, really. Metal detecting has this dual appeal.
How so?
Well, sure, there's the thrill of maybe finding something valuable, a coin, some jewelry.
Right, the treasure hunt aspect.
Exactly. But maybe deeper than that, there's this real connection to the past. I mean, actually holding something that someone lost or used generations ago, that's history in your hand.
That's a great way to put it.
And understanding where people lived, worked, played. Basically, human activity patterns. That's really the key to finding more of those stories.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dig into the fundamentals then. The sources we looked at were really clear on this. Before you even switch that detector on, research is just critical.
Oh, yeah. You can't skip that step.
You can't just wander around hoping to, stumble on something amazing. You really need to understand the history of an area.
Mm-hmm.
Know who lived there, what they did, big events.
Mm-hmm.
It just massively boosts your chances of finding something, well, interesting.
It focuses your search. Think about settlements, old paths, meeting places, anywhere people gathered or traveled. That's where things get lost or left behind.
Right. It's about context, isn't it?
Totally. Finding, a modern bottle cap tells you one thing, but finding an old coin or a buckle from, say, the 1700s in that same spot
Changes everything.
Exactly. It tells a different story about that piece of land. Connecting a site to a time period helps you target the kinds of things you're actually looking for.
Okay, super important. Now, before we get lost dreaming about finding, pirate gold.
Unlikely, but fun to think about.
Right. We need to talk about the, let's say, less glamorous side, permissions, legal stuff.
Absolutely crucial. Can't stress it enough.
Our info really hammers this home. You always need permission. Private property. Gotta ask the owner.
Mm-hmm.
Seems basic, but it's rule number one.
Golden rule, no question.
And for public land, it's worth checking with, say, the city hall or local authorities. You might be surprised, sometimes permits are free or easy to get.
Definitely check first. Don't assume.
But there are definite no-go areas. Historical parks, monuments, protected archaeological sites, almost always completely off-limits for detecting.
And for very good reasons. These sites are protected because they're historically significant. Any disturbance, even if you don't mean it, can cause real damage.
Yeah, it's about respecting that history and, frankly, avoiding legal trouble.
Precisely.
Now, for those out there who are really focused on coins, the sources mention folks called coin shooters.
Yes. The dedicated coin hunters.
There's a really interesting detail. Before 1965, American dimes, quarters, half dollars, they were 90% silver.
That's right. Real silver content.
Which makes them pretty sought after, right? Not just for the silver, but historically, too.
Both monetary and historical value.
So logically, any place that was busy before 1965 becomes a potential hotspot for finding those silver coins.
And it tells a story, that switch away from silver in 65 reflects bigger economic changes. So finding one isn't just finding silver.
It's like finding a little time capsule from that specific era.
Exactly. Which, again, just highlights why knowing the timeline of a place is so important.
Okay, so we've got the basics. Research, permissions, maybe target pre-65 spots for silver. Now for the exciting bit.
Yeah.
Where are these potential treasure troves?
Right, the locations.
Our sources point to a few key types. First up, maybe the biggest one, old homesteads.
Ah, yes, the holy grail for many detectorists.
It makes so much sense when you think about it, right? Families living there for generations, just countless chances for things to get lost, dropped, or even buried.
Think about daily life back then. Where did people spend time? Around the well, maybe? The barn? Paths between buildings.
High traffic areas?
Exactly. Prime spots for dropping coins, buttons, small tools, things like that. And then there's the old practice, especially in uncertain times, of actually burying valuables.
Like money in a jar, or maybe some jewelry.
Precisely. People didn't always trust banks, or maybe there wasn't a bank nearby. So burying it was safekeeping. That adds another whole layer of possibility.
Yeah, and it wasn't just like deliberate treasure burying. The sources mentioned just the everyday losses too. Kids playing, chores, stuff falls out of pockets.
Constantly, over decades or even centuries, that adds up.
So the advice is pretty simple. If you know of an old farm or a property with a really old house, it might be worth asking the owner for permission.
And often, owners are curious themselves. They might have wondered what's under their own lawn.
That's a good point. It could be interesting for them too.
Absolutely. Approaching them respectfully, showing genuine interest in the history. That often works wonders. You might offer to show them anything you find.
Builds trust. Good idea. Okay, what's next after homesteads?
Well, think about where people went for fun or for recreation in the past.
Okay.
Old campgrounds, children's summer camps especially. Think about dozens, hundreds of active kids running around for weeks each summer.
Oh, yeah. Lots of potential for lost items there.
Definitely. Pocket knives, coins, obviously, maybe bits of jewelry, toys. Things easily slip out of pockets when you're playing hard.
I can just picture an old summer camp from like the 50s or 60s. Lots of activity.
And the environment matters too. Woods, fields, maybe near water. More chances to lose things and not notice immediately. Plus the sheer number of people over many years, it accumulates.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of water,
Old swimming holes and lakes. Prime spots.
why specifically those?
Well, before public pools were everywhere, these natural spots were the social hubs in summer, right?
Yeah, where everyone went to cool off.
And think about beaches or pools today, what gets lost all the time.
Rings, jewelry.
Exactly. Water makes things slippery, sunscreen doesn't help, people are active. Jewelry, especially, is very commonly lost near water. Old swimming holes would be no different, maybe even more so.
So you'd want to figure out where people likely entered the water or where they sat on the bank.
Precisely. Try to visualize how it was used back then. Those concentration points are key.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. What about places that are, well, abandoned?
Abandoned properties. Now, these might look empty or derelict.
But not necessarily empty for a detectorist, right? That's what the sources said.
Exactly. Abandoned doesn't mean empty. Think about land that's marked for development, old trailer parks before they're cleared, even vacant lots in older parts of town.
Interesting. And developers might give permission before they bulldoze.
Sometimes, yeah. Doesn't hurt to ask politely before the heavy equipment moves in. They're focused on the future build, maybe not what's under the topsoil.
Worth a shot. What about smaller abandoned places?
Yeah, the sources mention things like those boarded-up cottages you see along old highways. Or abandoned gas stations.
Gas stations? Really?
Surprisingly, yes. Think about it, people stopping maybe for decades. Paying for gas, buying snacks, stretching their legs, coins dropped, maybe small items lost in the gravel driveway.
Huh. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Overgrown grass, gravel lots, they can hide quite a bit. And again, tracking down an owner, even if the place looks deserted, might get you permission. Curiosity is a powerful thing.
Okay, good tip. What about waterways? Rivers, streams?
Hugely significant historically. Where did towns and cities almost always start?
Near water. For transport, drinking water, power.
Right, so land along rivers and streams has often seen human activity for centuries, sometimes millennia.
So logically, more potential for finds over a longer period.
Definitely. The advice here is to try and think like a lost coin.
Huh. Okay, how does a coin think?
Well, where would people naturally gather near the water? Old crossing points like fords or ferry landings, scenic spots where people might sit, old dock locations, mill sites.
Places where people stopped or gathered or worked.
Exactly. Focus on those nodes of activity along the waterway. Understanding the landscape and how it was used is key.
Makes sense. Okay, moving into the community itself, landmarks, churches came up.
Yes, churches are often among the oldest buildings in a town. Their grounds have seen countless gatherings.
Services, weddings, picnics, community events.
For generations. Now, critical point here. Absolute respect is necessary. And never detect in a graveyard. That's completely off limits and disrespectful.
Right, absolutely avoid cemeteries.
But interestingly, many churches do allow detecting on their main grounds, like the lawns, if you ask permission respectfully.
Why are they potentially good spots, aside from being old?
Before town halls and community centers were common, the church was often this social hub. Meetings, markets, all sorts of things happen there, not just services.
So lots of different kinds of activity over a long time.
Precisely. Increases the chances of varied finds.
Similar idea for older schools, I guess.
Yep. Another community focal point, lots of kids, lots of activity over the years.
And the sources had a clever tip here. Sometimes old school buildings get converted into houses, right?
That's right. So doing a bit of local history research might help you spot a private home that used to be a school.
And then you approach the current homeowner. Sneaky.
Well, it just shows how research pays off. It unlocks sites you might otherwise overlook.
Okay, final category. General gathering places.
Yeah, think about places people congregated outdoors. Old drive-in movie theaters.
Oh, wow. Imagine the coins dropped between cars.
Exactly. Or town squares, old fairgrounds, bandstands in parks, anywhere people gathered regularly in the past.
And the sources made a distinction here, didn't they, between modern parks and these older spots?
Yeah, modern parks and beaches, you'll find stuff, but mostly recent things, modern coins, lost keys, maybe some newer jewelry.
More volume, less history.
Kind of. These older, historically significant gathering places might yield fewer finds overall.
But potentially much older, more historically interesting, maybe even more valuable items.
That's the idea. You're tapping into a specific slice of the past, potentially.
Okay, this is great. Lots of places to think about. Before we wrap up, any final practical tips for someone listening?
Yeah, a couple of important ones. First, don't assume a place is hunted out just because someone else has detected there before.
Really? You can still find things.
Oh, absolutely. People miss things. Different machines, different techniques, maybe the ground conditions change. Frost heave brings things up. There are lots of stories of amazing finds in supposedly searched areas. Persistence pays off.
So don't give up easily.
Right. And related to that, the sources mention beginners can learn a lot by going out with experienced detectorists, even just rechecking their holes sometimes.
See what they might have missed.
Yeah, or just understand their process better. It reinforces thoroughness.
Back to permissions one last time. Honesty is key when talking to landowners.
Always be upfront about what you're doing and why. Like we said, many are genuinely curious.
And maybe offer to share what you find, or at least show them.
Definitely. Offering to split anything truly valuable or just showing them the interesting bits and pieces builds goodwill. That can lead to permission to come back or maybe access to other spots they own. It's about building relationships.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Treat people and property with respect.
It's fundamental to the hobby, really.
Okay, so pulling this all together, it seems like successful metal detecting really comes down to what? Good research,
Understanding the history.
respect for property, knowing the rules,
Definitely.
and having that sense for where people actually were living, working, playing back in the day.
That's pretty much it. You're following the patterns of past human life.
And whether you find, those old silver coins or maybe a cool artifact or even just some modern jewelry that someone was sad to lose.
The thrill is in the discovery, right? That connection, turning something forgotten or discarded into, well, a treasure again, even if it's just a historical treasure.
Yeah. And you never know, right? That next single could be something truly amazing, something museum-worthy even.
It happens. It's rare, but it happens. Adds to the excitement.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As you're walking around today, just consider what might be lying just beneath your feet. Layers and layers of history, evidence of everyone who came before, just waiting.
Waiting to be rediscovered. It's a compelling thought.
It really is. Okay, that's all the time we have for this deep dive.